Ever been to an antique air show? Go to any major airport, because airlines in the U.S. have the oldest fleets of planes in the Western world. Did you know the average age of a Boeing 727 that's still flying is over 22 years old? That's the average. The 727 you fly tomorrow could be 30 years old. That means it was made in 1966.
I think people are entitled to know how old the aircraft that they're traveling in is and how many departure and arrival landings there have been in order to determine whether these aging aircraft should be retired by the airline companies.
Air travel can only be as safe as the plane itself. And for most of us, it's a marvel these metallic dinosaurs can even get off the ground. Industry giant Boeing has been having a bumpy ride lately. Since December, the reliable 757 has had 2 ghastly accidents. And the 737, the most popular 2-engine commercial jet in history, is suspect after 2 unsolved catastrophes.
We have 2 accidents presently, Colorado Springs and Pittsburgh, both involving the same type of aircraft.
NTSB Chairman Jim Hall runs the agency charged with pinpointing the cause of every crash and then recommending safety policies.
I'm not satisfied that the 737 is still flying today, and we have not had implementation of the recommendations out of the Pittsburgh crash.
In the Pittsburgh and Colorado Springs crashes, both 737s went down in clear weather, just dropped out of the sky. The death toll, 157 people. And then since February, another 2 crashes. A 737 went down in Peru, killing 123. And our country mourned the loss of some of its brightest leaders when a military version of the 737 went down on April 3rd, killing all on board. Boeing declined our request for an interview, but we did speak with David Hinson, head of the FAA. He has the authority to ground a plane if it's deemed unsafe.
If you take all of the flight hours and all of the accidents, it's still one of the very safest airplanes in the air, so it's safe.
Investigators still don't know why the 737s are going down. And here's another case of a plane still flying where they do know why it's crashed. The ATR-72. For some, not enough is being done to fix this plane.
It is a devastating scene. There is a small crater there, and the wreckage is strewn in a fairly close radius around the impact site.
Massive destruction of this.
Halloween, 1994. 64 passengers board American Eagle Flight 4184 and fly into a freezing Midwest rainstorm. If only they'd been informed that their plane, an ATR-72, has a history of problems in icy weather. Many of those people, maybe all of them, might have gotten off the ill-fated flight. The following is a dramatization using actual flight data and pilot transcripts from Flight 4184.
Hello, Eagle, Flight 184. Should be about 10 minutes until you cleared in.
No, I can double check on that. Just sent a message to dispatch. And 10 more minutes, she said. Whoa! I knew we'd do that. I'm trying to keep it at 180. Oh. Whoops! Okay. Man, oh! No, it's okay. It's all right, man. Okay, mellow it out. Okay, autopilot's disengaged. Okay. Nice and easy.
After the crash, some pilots actually walked off the job rather than fly the ATR-72 in icy conditions. Steve Frederick is one of the pilots who lost his job.
This is not going to happen again. If I lose my career, the truth would come out about the ATR.
The problem with the ATR-72 is ice. It builds up on the wings. The plane can then nosedive towards the ground, as it did in 2 crashes and a number of close calls.
We were almost instantaneously confronted with an aircraft that went from perfectly flyable, perfectly controllable, right on the beam, to an aircraft that was almost out of control and was trying to, frankly, kill us.
The FAA did ground the planes in bad weather, but the manufacturer added larger de-icing boots and did some additional testing. Now you can again fly an ATR-72 in the worst weather conditions. Here's the ticket to prove it. The same route taken during the devastating crash in Roselawn, Indiana. But is the plane safe?
That airplane is very safe today. Because of some data that we were able to collect as a result of the accident in Indiana, it's just fine.
In its final report released last week, NTSB investigator Greg Feith stated, this airplane is safe based on the awareness that the flight crews have, the operators have, and the industry has now.
Alan Brodeen, the president of AIR Marketing, is confident the plane poses no risk. Quote, after extensive icing tests conducted by ATR, a combination of procedures and modifications implemented on the fleet since June 1995 have resulted in the highest level of safety. These planes had no incidents throughout the very extreme icing conditions of the 1995-96 winter.
As long as the ticket agents give them the go-ahead to get on that airplane, passengers get on them without a second thought. And I think that people should start having second thoughts. Take a look at where they are placing their behinds.
And while we're at it, we should watch where we're landing. Another factor in the risk equation is the safety of the airport.
Pilots look at LaGuardia in New York as a real challenging airport. They say that you need a sort of a fighter pilot mentality to come into LaGuardia because there's a steep angle of approach and there are short runways, and Flushing Bay is sitting right at the end of the runways.
We're slowly coming down in altitude. We're having to make these turns right around all these buildings, monuments.
Another difficult approach is Washington, D.C.'s National Airport, rated the most challenging by pilots in a Condé Nast poll.
It's very unusual because you're coming down this river and you're looking out over here for the airport, following visual points on the ground, and your attention is really diverted away from flying the airplane.
At many airports, including National and John Wayne in Orange County, California, local regulations are in place to reduce jet noise.
Okay, as we come up to 1,500 feet, reduce thrust to the minimum available for level flight.
1,500 feet.
Which hopefully will reduce the noise.
That changes the way a pilot can fly the plane. At John Wayne, steep angles for takeoffs and landings create a wild ride.
National and John Wayne, they're by far the worst. They're an accident looking for a place to happen.
We pull back the thrust of the engine to reduce the noise. Now, no pilot really likes to do that.
We have to ask ourselves, is a quiet neighborhood more important than passenger safety?
The problem that I have is everybody wants electricity, but nobody wants the power company in their backyard. When you get on an airplane, you'd like to walk 5 minutes to the airport instead of drive an hour.
But is convenience more important than safety? It seems like commuter airports are everywhere. And guess what? They're not as safe as you might think. They can be tricky for landings and sometimes lack the latest safety equipment. Also, they're often serviced by commuter airlines with the most questionable planes and the least experienced pilots.
We've had a rash of commuter accidents.
You've probably seen or flown a commuter before. The small planes make convenient short jumps to smaller cities. But what you probably didn't know is that the crash rate of commuter airlines is twice that of larger commercial jets. And don't be fooled by names like United Express or Delta Connection. Commuter airlines are not necessarily owned, operated, or overseen by major airlines.
We did hearings on commuter airline safety a few years ago. I mean, I had any number of pilots who wanted to talk to me privately in my office, on the telephone, you know, in a parking lot somewhere to tell me that this is a disaster waiting to happen.
Commuter and regional airlines often hire entry-level pilots with less training and less experience than major carriers.
They're being paid less than, you know, taxi drivers in many cases. They're required to have fewer hours of training than a beautician in the state of Oregon. You know, there's something wrong with this picture.
Recognizing the problem, the FAA is planning to unveil sweeping new regulations that it hopes will increase commuter airline safety. Next up, You may be surprised to learn just how unsafe your child can be on an airplane. But first, the plain truth about United 811. In 1989, the 747 had climbed to 23,000 feet when a faulty cargo door became loose, blowing out a 20-foot hole in the plane. 9 people flew into the night sky. At least one went directly into the turbine engine. Bruce Lampert was one of the lucky passengers who survived.
United 811 was every air passenger's worst nightmare.
It could be your nightmare. That same United jet is back, flying passengers over the Pacific. We found that repaired 747 at San Francisco International Airport, certified to fly. Would you buy a ticket? Travel can only be as safe as the plane itself. And for most of us, it's a marvel these metallic dinosaurs can even get off the ground. Industry giant Boeing has been having a bumpy ride lately. Since December, the reliable 757 has had 2 ghastly accidents. And the 737, the most popular 2-engine commercial jet in history, is suspect after 2 unsolved catastrophes.
We have 2 accidents presently, Colorado Springs and Pittsburgh.
Vital to know how old the aircraft that they're traveling in is and how many departure and arrival landings there have been in order to determine whether these aging aircraft should be retired by the airline companies.
Average age of a Boeing 727 that's still flying is over 22 years old. That's the average. The 727 you fly tomorrow could be 30 years old. That means it was made in 1966.
I think people are entitled.
Ever been to an antique air show? Go to any major airport, because airlines in the U.S. have the oldest fleets of planes in the Western world. Did you know the